Mysa, we will try the experiment. Jethro shall be your special attendant, and when you have nothing for him to do, which will be the best part of the day, he can look after the waterfowl. Zunbo never attends them properly. Do you understand that?" he asked Jethro. Jethro replied by stepping forward, taking the girl's hand, and bending over it until his forehead touched it. "There is an answer for you, Mysa." "You indulge the children too much, Ameres," his wife said irritably. "I do not think in all Egypt there are any children so spoiled as ours. Other men's sons never speak unless addressed, and do not think of sitting down in the presence of their father. I am astonished indeed that you, who are looked up to as one of the wisest men in Egypt, should suffer your children to be so familiar with you." "Perhaps, my dear," Ameres said with a placid smile, "it is because I am one of the wisest men in Egypt. My children honor me in their hearts as much as do those who are kept in slave like subjection. How is a boy's mind to expand if he does not ask questions? And who should be so well able to answer his questions as his father? There, children, you can go now. Take your new companions with you, and show them the garden and your pets." "We are fortunate indeed, Jethro," Amuba said as they followed Chebron and Mysa into the garden. "When we pictured to ourselves as we lay on the sand at night during our journey hither what our life would be, we never dreamed of anything like this. We thought of tilling the land, of aiding to raise the great dams and embankments, of quarrying stones for the public buildings, of a grinding and hopeless slavery, and the only thing that ever we ventured to hope for was that we might toil side by side. And now, see how good the gods have been to us. Not only are we together, but we have found friends in our masters, a home in this strange land." "Truly it is wonderful, Amuba. This priest Ameres is a most excellent person, one to be loved by all who come near him. We have indeed been most fortunate in having been chosen by him." The brother and sister led the way through an avenue of fruit trees, at the end of which a gate led through the high paling of rushes into an inclosure some 50 feet square. It was surrounded by trees and shrubs, and in their shade stood a number of wooden structures. In the center was a pool occupying the third of the area, and like the large pond before the house bordered with aquatic plants. At the edge stood 2 ibises, while many brilliantly plumaged waterfowl were swimming on its surface or cleaning their feathers on the bank. As soon as the gate closed there was a great commotion among the waterfowl. The ibises advanced gravely to meet their young mistress, the ducks set up a chorus of welcome, those on the water made for the shore, while those on land followed the ibises with loud quackings. But the first to reach them were 2 gazelles, which bounded from one of the wooden huts and were in an instant beside them, thrusting their soft muzzles into the hands of Chebron and Mysa, while from the other structures arose a medley of sounds, the barking of dogs and the sounds of welcome from a variety of creatures. "This is not your feeding time, you know," Chebron said, looking at the gazelles, "and for once we have come empty handed, but we will give you something from your stores. See, Jethro, this is their larder," and he led the way into a structure somewhat larger than the rest. Along the walls were a number of boxes of various sizes, while some large bins stood below them. "Here, you see," he went on, opening one of the bins and taking from it a handful of freshly cut vetches, and going to the door and throwing it down before the gazelles, "this is their special food. It is brought in fresh every morning from our farm, which lies 6 miles away. The next bin contains the seed for the waterfowl. It is all mixed here, you see, wheat and peas and pulse and other seeds. Mysa, do give them a few handfuls, for I can hardly hear myself speak from their clamor. In this box above you see there is a pan of sopped bread for the cats. There is a little mixed with the water, but only a little, for it will not keep good. Those cakes are for them too. Those large, plain, hard baked cakes in the next box are for the dogs. They have some meat and bones given them 2 or 3 times a week. These frogs and toads in this cage are for the little crocodile. He has a tank all to himself. All these other boxes are full of different food for the other animals you see. There's a picture of the right animal upon each, so there is no fear of making a mistake. We generally feed them ourselves 3 times a day when we are here, but when we are away it will be for you to feed them." "And please," Mysa said, "above all things, be very particular that they have all got fresh water. They do love fresh water so much. And sometimes it is so hot that the pans dry up in an hour after it has been poured out. You see, the gazelles can go to the pond and drink when they are thirsty, but the others are fastened up because they won't live peaceably together as they ought to do. But we let them out for a bit while we are here. The dogs chase the waterfowl and frighten them, and the cats will eat up the little ducklings, which is very wrong when they have plenty of proper food, and the ichneumon, even when we are here, would quarrel with the snakes if we let him into their house. They are very troublesome that way, though they are all so good with us. The houses all want making nice and clean of a morning." The party went from house to house inspecting the various animals, all of which were most carefully attended. The dogs, which were, Chebron said, of a Nubian breed, were used for hunting, while on comfortable beds of fresh rushes 3 great cats lay blinking on large cushions, but got up and rubbed against Mysa and Chebron in a token of welcome. A number of kittens that were playing about together rushed up with upraised tails and loud mewings. Amuba noticed that their 2 guides made a motion of respect as they entered the house where the cats were, as well as toward the dogs, the ichneumon, and the crocodile, all of which were sacred animals in Thebes. Many instructions were given by Mysa to Jethro as to the peculiar treatments that each of her pets demanded, and having completed their rounds the party then explored the garden, and Amuba and Jethro were greatly struck by the immense variety of plants, which had indeed been raised from seeds or roots brought from all the various countries where the Egyptian arms extended. For a year the time passed tranquilly and pleasantly to Amuba in the household of the priest. His duties and those of Jethro were light. In his walks and excursions Amuba was Chebron's companion. He learned to row his boat when he went out fishing on the Nile. When thus out together the distinction of rank was altogether laid aside, but when in Thebes the line was necessarily more marked, as Chebron could not take Amuba with him to the houses of the many friends and relatives of his father among the priestly and military classes. When the priest and his family went out to a banquet or entertainment Jethro and Amuba were always with the party of servants who went with torches to escort them home. The service was a light one in their case, but not so in many others, for the Egyptians often drank deeply at these feasts, and many of the slaves always took with them light couches upon which to carry their masters home. Even among the ladies who generally took their meals apart from the men upon these occasions, drunkenness was by no means uncommon. When in the house Amuba was often present when Chebron studied, and as he himself was most anxious to acquire as much as he could of the wisdom of the Egyptians, Chebron taught him the hieroglyphic characters, and he was ere long able to read the inscriptions upon the temple and public buildings, and to study from the papyrus scrolls, of which vast numbers were stowed away in pigeonholes ranged round one of the largest rooms in the house. When Chebron's studies were over Jethro instructed him in the use of arms, and also practiced with Amuba. A teacher of the use of the bow came frequently, for Egyptians of all ranks were skilled in the use of the national weapon, and the Rebu captives, already skilled in the bow as used by their own people, learned from watching his teaching of Chebron to use the longer and much more powerful weapon of the Egyptians. Whenever Mysa went outside the house Jethro accompanied her, waiting outside the house as she visited until she came out, or going back to fetch her if her stay was a prolonged one. Greatly they enjoyed the occasional visits made by the family to their farm. Here they saw the cultivation of the fields carried on, watched the plucking of the grapes and their conversion into wine. To extract the juice the grapes were heaped in a large flat vat above which ropes were suspended. A dozen barefooted slaves entered the vat and trod out the grapes, using the ropes to lift themselves in order that they might drop with greater force upon the fruit. Amuba had learned from Chebron that although he was going to enter the priesthood as an almost necessary preliminary for state employment, he was not intended to rise to the upper rank of the priesthood, but to become a state official. "My elder brother will, no doubt, some day succeed my father as high priest of Osiris," he told Amuba. "I know that my father does not think that he is clever, but it is not necessary to be very clever to serve in the temple. I thought that, of course, I too should come to high rank in the priesthood, for, as you know, almost all posts are hereditary, and though my brother as the elder would be high priest, I should be one of the chief priests also. But I have not much taste that way, and rejoiced much when one day saying so to my father, he replied at once that he should not urge me to devote my life to the priesthood, for that there were many other offices of state which would be open